Good morning, and welcome to worship with UUCV this morning, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Ventura. I am Worship Associate Xina Kingshill, and I am joined today by Worship Associate Sandy Atkins, a very good friend and also my sister-in-law. Our minister, the Reverend Dana Warsnop, is out of the pulpit today, though I think she's here spying on us. Therefore, we're going to have another one of our wonderful summer cluster services, this one recorded by Reverend Julia Hamilton of the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara. She currently serves as their lead minister, and she joined their congregation in 2011. She is a lifelong Unitarian Universalist and earned her Master of Divinity from Harvard Divinity School back in 2008. So I have recently returned from travel to the land of my ancestors, Eastern Europe and England. I am really glad to be back here. The weather over there was terrible. I'm glad to be here with all of you, and those of you here in the sanctuary, and those of you out there in Zoom land. But I want to invite all of you to take a deep breath together and open our hearts to the Chumash people who have cared for and preserved this beautiful land that we now call home. May we too care for it lovingly so that it brings joy for generations to come. So, all of you should be reading UUCV this week, every Thursday when it comes out. But we're going to highlight a few announcements today. So Sandy, what do you know about this UU Wellspring program that Carolyn's going to talk about today?
Well, nowhere's near enough, which is why we should all go after church and listen to what Carolyn says about this new 8-month-long spiritual deepening class.
And Sandy, have you submitted your auction donation?
I did it informally in an email, but I didn't fill out the form or anything yet. But there's going to be some fun dinners, including a Cinco de Mayo, 5 different kinds of homemade mayo. So everybody else should join and think of some fun things we can do to get together and be of service to each other and submit your own auction information.
And lastly, what about choir?
Choir, for 2.5 years, I've been saying, oh, I can't wait for choir to start. I miss singing. And now it's starting up Wednesdays at 6:30 to 8 here in the sanctuary. Woohoo! First service is going to be around the third week in September, where we actually sing, so we get to warm up a little bit after all that time.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Now, enter with me the sacred space. Bring with you what is yours: a burdened heart, a joyous song, a wearied spirit, a seeking mind. Bring the gift of yourself to the altar. It is an honorable gift.
I'm Worship Associate Sandy Atkins, wishing you a beautiful Sunday, hopefully about as grateful as I am to live in this gorgeous area. I don't know why I'm so lucky, but I'm happy I am. So here in the sanctuary, wherever you may be finding us, we invite everybody who is Zooming and otherwise at home to light their own chalice or a candle, as Xina lights the chalice of our free faith here in the sanctuary. Our call to worship this morning comes from the Reverend Kimberly Debus, debut, if it's French. I have no idea, I'm sorry. She is community minister based in Tacoma Park, Maryland, where I used to live. She says she wrote this poem because she couldn't find anything that worked. That seems to fit with our theme of paradox today. There are no good opening words, written long ago or even recently, that capture this moment. We are in uncharted territory, taking up a task our past selves and our ancestors could only imagine. But here we are the people this moment needs, and so let us take up our work in covenant, in faith, in pursuit of healing and holding. Let our work today be truthful and helpful, despite our fears and uncertainties, despite our anxieties and frustrations. And let us chart this new course that says we were, we are, and we can be again.
Morning and welcome everyone. I'm Carolyn Bjerke, the music director, and I would like to invite any of you that are interested in coming and checking out choir or possibly joining to come to our first meeting on September 7th from 6:30 to 8. So just throwing that out there. If you've been thinking maybe you want to give it a try, please come. It's a wonderful group and community, as well as what we get to give to the congregation. Our opening hymn is Sing and Rejoice. So please rise in body or spirit, and we will sing it 3 times. Sing and rejoice, sing and rejoice. Let all things living now sing and rejoice, sing and rejoice, sing and rejoice. Let all things living now sing and rejoice, sing and rejoice, sing and rejoice. Let all things living now sing and rejoice.
Each Sunday, the congregation gives away our collection to an organization in the larger community or to funds that help people in our own church. Those at home have 2 ways to give: through the link posted in the chat or by texting from your phone at 844-901-1779. Folks who are present in the sanctuary can text to give also, or if you wish, you can write a check and leave it, or give cash and drop it in the basket that's at the back of the sanctuary after the service. Our offering today goes to Buddy Nation, to care for the animals who are such important support for and companions to our homeless neighbors. Recently, Buddy Nation received a call from a sober living home asking if Buddy Nation could care for Nina, the pet of a woman that we'll call Jane, who had just moved in to work on her sobriety. That's Nina in the middle there. This particular sober living home did not accept pets. Naturally, Buddy Nation said yes, and their leader, Cappy Patterson, took one look at Nina, the adorable Chihuahua seen here in her car, and knew she'd fit right in with the 2 Chihuahuas that were already at Cappy's home. After several weeks, Jane was able to move into a different sober living home that would accept pets, and she and Nina were reunited. The folks at Buddy Nation showed up with Nina and a new bed and food for Nina, knowing that this adorable Chihuahua would be an important part of Jane's recovery. Cappy sent us a follow-up to this story on Friday saying, "I just spoke with Jane this morning and she sounds stable and happy with her sobriety." Today, we support the good work of Buddy Nation. Thank you for giving generously as you always do. We are so grateful for the generosity of this congregation. It is such an important part of the beautiful, connected tapestry of love that we weave together.
Part of life is its joys and sorrows, and it gives us strength to share these experiences within our worship community so that we can support each other. We place stones in the water for both the ups and downs in our hearts, with the ripples that result reaching out to touch us all. I invite you now to speak into the gathered community or into the Zoom chat the names of those you wish to celebrate or memorialize, or those in need of the loving embrace of our beloved community. Please feel free to continue to add to the chat even after the silent pause has ended. Xina will now place one final stone in the water for all the joys and sorrows yet unspoken in the silent sanctuary of our hearts. May we be truly grateful for all that is our life.
Please remain seated as we sing our meditative hymn, Love Knocks and Waits for Us to Hear. It is a little unfamiliar, so I'm going to play it through one time, and then we'll sing it. Love knocks and waits for us to hear, to open and invite. Love longs to quiet every fear and seeks to set things right. Love offers life in spite of foes who threaten and condemn. Embracing enemies, love goes the second mile with them. Love comes to heal the broken heart, to ease the troubled mind. Without a word, love bids us start to ask and seek and find. Love knocks and enters at the sound of welcome from within. Love sings and dances all around and feels new life begin.
Our reading today is by William Stafford, The Way It Is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. I invite you now into a time of meditation. The poem we just heard tells us, don't ever let go of the thread. And as challenging as that is, it can be more challenging to quiet oneself and let the moment be. Let us all take a moment of silence to quiet ourselves and be.
Let our hearts not be hardened to those living on the margins. There is room at the table for everyone. This is where it all begins. This is how we gather in. There is room at the table for everyone. Too long we have wandered, burdened and undone, but there is room at the table for everyone. Let us sing the new world in. This is how it all begins. There is room at the table for everyone. There is room for us all, and no gift is too small. There is room at the table for everyone. There's enough if we share. Come on, pull up a chair. There is room at the table for everyone. No matter who you are, no matter where you're from, there is room at the table for everyone. Here and now we can be the beloved community. There is room at the table for everyone. There is room for us all, and no gift is too small. There is room at the table for everyone. There's enough if we share. Come on, pull up a chair. There is room at the table for everyone. There is room for us all, and no gift is too small. There is room at the table for everyone. There's enough if we share. Come on, pull up a chair. There is room at the table for everyone. Let our hearts not be hardened to the living on the margins. There is room at the table for everyone. This is how we gather in. For everyone.
Our sermon for today has been prepared by Reverend Julia Hamilton of the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara. Her introduction to this service states, "Our Unitarian forebear, Ralph Waldo Emerson, charged us to follow our own individual moral intuition above all else. But what about our need for community and relationship? This is the creative tension that lies at the heart of our faith, and perhaps of life itself."
Greetings and hello from the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara. I'm the Reverend Julia Hamilton, and I serve as the minister of this congregation, and I am so delighted that you have welcomed me to your congregation this morning and to be part of this cluster in our region of collaborative partnerships. It's wonderful that we can work together in this way. On a July evening in 1838, Ralph Waldo Emerson stepped into the pulpit in the chapel at Harvard Divinity School to address the graduating senior class, the group of 7 men who were preparing to go out into the field of ministry for the first time. There were, of course, no women in attendance. Women would not be admitted to the Divinity School until 1955. But in 1838, these graduating men were joined by other local Unitarian clergy and professors from the seminary to hear some words of wisdom from Emerson, who was already one of the most famous public speakers of his time. That evening, he gave a radical and provocative lecture that came to be known as the Divinity School Address. In this speech, not only did he specifically reject the divinity of Jesus and offer up the idea that the Christian Bible is not the only source of divine wisdom, but he also called out the church and its leadership at the time as being uninspired, overly formal, and perhaps worst, downright boring. He did not hold back with his critique. And then he challenged his listeners, these newly ordained Unitarian ministers, with a way forward. Here is a snippet of what he said. "Let me admonish you, first of all, to go alone, to refuse the good models, even those which are sacred in the imagination of men, and dare to love God without mediator or veil. Yourself, a newborn bard of the Holy Ghost, cast behind you all conformity and acquaint men at first hand with deity. Look to it first and only, that fashion, custom, authority, pleasure, and money are nothing to you, are not bandages over your eyes that you cannot see, but live with the privilege of the immeasurable mind." From Emerson's perspective, every human being had the ability to tap into that immeasurable mind at the heart of creation. The job of a preacher, as he saw it, was to call forth that moral intuition from within each person. Otherwise, he said, there was no point in going to church at all. He went on to state that the intuition of the moral sentiment that resides within each of us is the ultimate guide to living, not the Bible, not the church, not the rules of society. He told these young preachers to break away from the limits of the formal structure of the church and trust their own internal compass above all else. This was not a well-received message. He was raked over the coals of public opinion, called an atheist, and generally condemned by the Unitarian Christian establishment of the time. But years later, the transcendentalism that Emerson preached became a foundational theological movement within Unitarianism. His name is right here on one of the windows of our sanctuary, and I bet if you look around other Unitarian Universalist congregations, you'll see his name emblazoned on the walls everywhere. Unitarian Universalism still embraces the call to the individual right of conscience and moral intuition that Emerson articulated. But is this path of spiritual individualism, of each of us following our own moral intuition, enough? Is it enough to satisfy the longings of our soul? In 2008, when I was about to graduate from Divinity School, 170 years after Emerson gave the Divinity School address, a colleague gathered us all into the very same chapel where Emerson had stood at that very same pulpit and read these words to us once again. It really was a beautiful and inspiring moment to feel that lineage of our tradition. And yet I had to think to myself, how many times has this speech been reread in this space? Has this speech itself become one of those dead rituals that Emerson railed against? And have we embraced his call to individualism and go-it-aloneness to such a degree that we have forgotten the other side of the coin, the human need for belonging and community? Margaret Wheatley is an author and scholar who studies organizational behavior and may have some words of wisdom for us as we navigate this tension within Emerson and our tradition. In her essay, The Promise and the Paradox of Community, she observes that all living things are caught in a paradox. between the need for individual freedom and the need to create relationships. In her work analyzing systems, she traces our biological history up from single-celled organisms all the way to modern human societies. And she says, life's first imperative is that it must be free to create itself. One biological definition of life is that something is alive if it has the capacity to create itself. Life begins with this primal freedom to create, this capacity for self-determination. But then she goes on to say, life's second great imperative propels individuals out from themselves to search for community. There is a need to be in relationship, to be connected to others. Individuals cannot survive alone. As systems form, the paradox of individualism and connectedness becomes clearer. So as she describes it, from our earliest beginnings as paramecium, we developed boundaries, cell walls that distinguished us one from another. We reproduced and sent our offspring out into the primordial soup to find their own way and reproduce some more, and life evolved into diverse and interdependent ecologies of relationship as we reached toward the sunlight. And then, perhaps some early Emersonian tetrapods crawled up out of the sea in search of their own destiny, away from the crowded ocean society. And eons later, we are still creating communities and then paradoxically pushing back against them to set out on our own. We have been casting behind all conformity since the dawn of life itself. It reminds me of a phrase that I had written on my notebook cover in high school. Be a nonconformist, everybody's doing it. And so I ask you, all of you, how many of you here today left a restrictive religious tradition that exacted too high a price on you as an individual? Go ahead and raise your hand or type me, that was me, in the chat. How many of you arrived here because of your need for autonomy, for the right to be yourself without judgment or fear? And now, at the same time, how many of you arrived here because of your need for connection, for community, for a sense of belonging and purpose? How many of you struggle with that feeling of isolation that is so common in our modern life? Go ahead and raise your hands. Now, how many of you raised your hands for both of these things? You are here because you are seeking greater freedom and greater connection. Here in the United States, the demographic trends tell us that people are getting really good at leaving institutions, particularly religious institutions, but are not so great at finding new communities after breaking off from old ones. After having been disillusioned or wounded from a heartbreaking experience, many people simply give up hope that they will be able to find what they are looking for. They live with their loneliness and never perhaps reinvest in the kind of community that would answer their longing for connection, while at the same time respecting their self-integrity. Sometimes I think that we Unitarian Universalists are here because we are that minority that refuses to settle. We want both freedom and connection. As Wheatley says, it seems that whenever we bargain with life and seek to satisfy only one of its two great needs, the result is a quality of true lifelessness. We must live within the paradox, she says. Life does not allow us to choose sides. So far this all sounds great, right? Living within this paradox, but how do we manage to live inside a paradox? How do we both retain the integrity of our individual search for meaning while supporting interdependence and healthy connection? What do you do when that creative tension of togetherness starts to feel less creative and more tense? Because friends, let me tell you, living in community is hard. Sometimes it does seem easier to toss it all aside and live on your own individual terms. How do we belong to communities of meaning and purpose without losing ourselves in the process? Friends, the only answer I have found is love. Love is what binds us together and at the same time what liberates us. A miraculous thing happens when you feel loved. You also feel free. I invite you to take a moment now and remember a time when you felt loved, really truly loved and held, and reflect on your own experience of that moment. Did you feel freer, more able to be yourself, more open and courageous when you felt loved? One of those moments happened for me when I was young in a Unitarian Universalist youth group. And it's what I think of as a conversion moment, because even though I grew up Unitarian Universalist, I still have a conversion story, a moment when I realized that, yes, I was going to choose this faith tradition. And not just because I was raised this way, but because I felt loved and accepted within it. Loved and accepted enough to make me want to put in the time and the effort to stay involved. This happened to me when I was about 12 or 13, and me and two friends from my church in New Orleans had driven to Pensacola, Florida to attend our first district youth conference. We were at a very small youth group, way far away from any other congregations, and we were hungry for community. And I still vividly remember this scene. There was this registration table set up outside the front door of the church that was hosting the conference, and there were these carloads of kids arriving and hauling out sleeping bags and pillows and greeting each other across the parking lot. Clearly, a lot of them knew each other. And so just the three of us, who were probably some of the youngest kids there, we were just starting out, I think 8th grade, and we timidly walked up to the registration table, and suddenly one of the youth who had the registration form behind the thing saw our name, saw where we were from, and called out so everyone could hear, "The people from New Orleans are here." And then 2 or 3 people sprinted over to us like we were long lost relatives. They were hugging us and introducing us all around. And we went from feeling isolated and alone and nervous and knowing no one to feeling loved and accepted in a flash. And we weren't loved because of anything we did. We just showed up. But it was enough. It was enough that we were just there. And in that moment, over that weekend, I got a taste of what liberation felt like. I got a taste of what it felt like to have that expansive sense of yourself when you are held in a loving community. I had an experience of what I now call beloved community, and I was converted. Love like this creates a security through which we can then explore life. I think of love like this safety line, like something that divers use while exploring underwater caves, or like the thread in William Safford's poem, or maybe like Theseus from the Greek myths, unwinding that spool of thread to help him find his way through the labyrinth to kill the Minotaur. Only by being tethered by that thread of love can we roam our own inner lives with confidence and share ourselves freely and courageously with others. Only when held in love can we confront the monsters that wait for us in life and make it back safely out of the labyrinths that we have to enter from time to time. Love is embedded within that paradox of life. It is the thread that keeps it all together. In traditional Christian theology, Jesus is the source of that ultimate love as the human personification of God. It is one of the most powerful messages of the Christian tradition to tell someone that no matter who they are or what they are done, they can be loved. When Emerson questioned the divinity of Jesus in that address, when he stepped outside the Christian tradition for his source of inspiration, what it felt like to many was that he was questioning the very foundation of love itself. What would happen to this unconditional acceptance if Jesus was no longer at the center? If the whole biblical tradition was called into question? What would happen to that love? Would everything just unravel? Would we stay lost in the labyrinth forever? What I think that Unitarian Universalism teaches us is that love itself is transcendent. It requires no intermediary. It is available and present within everyone, and we don't have to wait until after we die to find it. Love is a thread that weaves through us, whether we are atheist or theist or agnostic, whether we follow Jesus or Buddha or our own inner wisdom. It is available to us as individuals, but what we have also learned is that love is only made real in our relationships with one another, in the way we welcome and make space for one another, and in the way we find our way back to community, time and time again. To belong to a loving community is to allow the freedom within us to blossom. Love holds us and keeps us safe so that we can experience moments of life-changing liberation. It is the fulfillment of that paradox of all living things. Only by belonging to one another can we truly be free. Only by belonging to one another can we truly be free. Blessed be, amen, and may it be so.
A blessing called sanctuary. This is a prayer by Jan Richardson that Reverend Hamilton asked to be read at the end of the sermon. You hardly knew how hungry you were to be gathered in, to receive the welcome that invited you to enter entirely. Nothing of you found foreign or strange, nothing of your life that you were asked to leave behind, or to carry in silence or in shame. Tentative steps became settling in, leaning into the blessing that enfolded you, taking your place in the circle that stunned you with its unimagined grace. You began to breathe again, to move without fear, to speak with abandon the words you carried in your bones that echoed in your being. You learned to sing. But the deal with this blessing is that it will not leave you alone, will not let you linger in safety, in stasis. The time will come when this blessing will ask you to leave, not because it has tired of you, but because it desires for you to become the sanctuary that you have found. To speak your word into the world. To tell what you have heard with your own ears, seen with your own eyes, known in your own heart. That you are beloved, precious child of God, beautiful to behold, and you are welcome and more than welcome here.
Please rise and by your spirit and join me in our closing hymn, Break Not the Circle. Break not the circle of enabling love, where people grow forgiven and forgiving. Break not that circle, make it wider still, till it includes, embraces all the living. Come wonder at this love that comes to life, where words of freedom are with humor spoken, and people keep no score of wrong or guilt, but will that human bonds remain unbroken. Join then the movement of the
Please join me in reading the words on the screen as we prepare to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. Those we carry into our lives until we are together again.
I leave you with words from Reverend Julia Hamilton. May the light of love shine upon you, out from within you, be gracious unto you, and bring you peace. For this is the day we are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Please join us outdoors for coffee and sharing in the back parking lot. And those of you on Zoom, please join your Zoom chat rooms as you wish. Thank you.
Oh, I got credit for doing the songs.